What is one story you will never tell your parents? My second year in college, some of my friends and I were going to be playing in a softball beer drinking tournament in a town 45 minutes away from my parents' house. We started drinking around 8 in the morning and continued to drink all day long. At about 10 PM I've had enough of being at the park. My ex-girlfriend showed up and want to go to a bar near my parents' house. So 6 of us load up into my small car and we proceed to drive to this bar. I shouldn't have been driving myself, let alone a car full of my friends. We get to the bar and continue drinking until bar close at 2:30 and we pile back into my car. I live in the country which has surprisingly smooth roads with no cops, so I do the drunk thing and top out my car. I was going roughly 120 when I heard the back window open. I look back and one of my friends is climbing out and climbing onto the roof. I look up through my moonroof and I see him sitting pretzel-legged with his arms outstretched with the biggest smile on his face. I started freaking out a little bit, so I slowed down to 70. He rode on the roof the whole way home from the bar, which is about a 10-minute ride. We all slept in the basement, and when we woke up my mom's like, "Wow, you guys must have been crammed in the car," and I go, "No, it was pretty comfortable. We had a guy on the roof." I never lie to my parents, I just tell them in ways that makes it sound non-believable. My essential baptism of fire to my sexuality. I was in a lesbian relationship for 4 years to a woman who worked as a dominatrix. She was 6 years older than me. And I had just turned 16 when we started to get intimate. Because she didn't want to do anything when I was younger. My parents just assumed she was a friend. Because all of my friends were in that age group. She sometimes had me assisting with her clients. No actual sex. But helping with needle and fire play. My parents are very conservative. Very cautious. And very old-fashioned. Earlier this year I managed to get a solid 2-week vacation. I couldn't decide where to go. So I was just using Kayak and Google Flight Search to find cheap flights and then Google the country and local stuff to do. I found a flight to Egypt for pretty cheap. And always wanted to see the pyramids. So I bought a flight there. Then I decided to try couchsurfing. I stayed with an awesome guy and his mom. He picked me up from the airport. Showed me around. Traveled with me to Sinai. We went diving. Snorkeling. ATVing. Lots of stuff. We ended up hitchhiking in the area as our ride fell through, not the safest thing to do anywhere. Especially Sinai. But it turned out great. One of my best trips. But never in a million years will I ever tell my mom that I traveled alone to Egypt to stay with a stranger from the internet. It was the summer between grade 6 and grade 7. A friend and I decided it'd be cool if we hand drilled, without a vise, a few holes in a golf ball to blow it up with some cherry bombs. What I didn't know was that drill bits meant for wood can't hold up to the friction. About halfway into the ball, the bit snaps. And I drive the drill straight into the side of my finger. The worst part of this was when I looked down at my hand and a little blue vein is sticking out of my finger. I quickly turned a ghostly shade of green and ran to my room. My hand wrapped in my shirt. After about 20 minutes of laying on my bed thinking I was about to die, I put a band-aid on my finger. And ignored it for about 2 weeks. Once a couple weeks passed, I took the band-aid off. Only to find that the hole had healed with the now dead vein sticking out. Knowing I should have gone to the doctors in the first place, I took some nail clippers and cut it off. I never had any problems after that or said a single word to my parents. I'm sure if I even told them today, my dad, who has 30+ years experience in fire and EMS, would lose his shit. On a trip to Canada, my bro and I did something very stupid while our mom and stepdad were out. There was about 1.5 gallons of lemonade in the refrigerator, so obviously we had to drink it all in one sitting. We poured it into 6 glasses, 3 for each of us, and decided that we should see who could finish them first. As soon as we finished, we both had the same feeling. Out of nowhere I just puked on my brother. And in his disgust and acid-filled belly, he puked on me. And we just stood there, puking on each other for 5 minutes straight. We had to sneak out in our underwear and throw out our clothes in the dumpster near where we were staying. We cleaned the puke from the floor very well and took showers. Not as bad as the other stories here, but the only one I could come up with. A week before I graduated high school, I was kicked out of my parents' house and spent the night on at a boat party in Sausalito, CA. At this party, a drunk BTCH pushed me off the dock when I was taking a leak and I lost my phone, my cigarettes and my car keys, which, incidentally, belonged to my parents. The next morning I had my friend drive me back to my parents' house in his car so I could sneak in and grab the valet key. Then drove me back so I could take the car to work. A year later, I went on a trip with my friends in this same car to the north of California, close to the Oregon border, so they could purchase some weed. They bought it and stuck it in the trunk of the car and drove back. Around 3 in the morning the next day, the 4th of July, 2009. We were pulled over by the highway patrol officer who pulled us out and began to search the car. He took my key and went to open the trunk of the car. But because I had lost my original key a year ago. And because I had to use the valet key. And because the valet key doesn't open the trunk of a Chrysler Sebring 98. They never found it. But they did take the box of Entenmann's powder donut holes from the front seat. When I was 15, I hired a prostitute. Backstory. I was a lonely kid. Fat. Going through depression. My mom was at work and I had hours to myself. I went to the store. There was this one lady who was on the corner and without really realizing how old I was, asked if I wanted to go out on a date. We kind of awkwardly stared at each other for a couple of seconds before, in my totally socially awkward mind, asked her if we could play board games during this date. She looked at me funny, but actually agreed. So we went back to my house and she looked surprised, maybe relieved, when I pulled out a few board games. For the couple of hours, we played chess. She won, and Monopoly, I won. It was honestly a lot of fun. We talked about nothing important, but it was nice to just talk, you know? Eventually, she had to leave, and when I asked how much, she refused the money. I honestly wish I could find her again to give her my thanks. One time my friends and I were tripping on shrooms and we had been watching an Oz marathon on HBO. Once the show was over we all felt like we had to get out of the house. So still tripping, we got in the car. I was driving. We stopped and got like $20 one cheeseburgers from McDonald's. We lived close to a beautiful lake with a lovely drive around it, but the road kind of abruptly ends in the ghetto. So we have a fantastic flower-filled drive around the lake but then end up in the projects. We are sitting at red light, eating cheeseburgers when this homeless bag lady starts walking toward the driver's side window. I'm trying to ignore her because they always want money or cigarettes and I'm totally still tripping balls. She knocks on the window and I'm ignoring her. She starts yelling about a cheeseburger. My friend is in the back seat, a cheeseburger in each hand, cheeseburger hanging out of his mouth. He yells, "We ain't got no motherfucking cheeseburgers." Double quote. I was so freaked out that I ran the red light and almost wrecked. At a family gathering we were sitting around with my now late grandmother telling stories about when my dad and his brother were kids. My dad told a story about how my grandmother went in to go shopping and left him and his brother in the car. They were about 8 and 10 years old. They decided to take the car for a joyride around the block, and when they got back, the parking spot was taken. They had to park it somewhere else and spent hours convincing my grandmother that she had really parked there. After he told that story, my grandmother, who at the time was in her late 80s, jumped up, her eyes hair as bright as can be, and she yelled, "I knew I didn't park there." Double quote. Basically everything that I did when I wasn't home at the ages 13-15. That's cigarettes, alcohol, cannabis and latemdma. I was very interested and fascinated with drugs and experimented with them a lot. By the time I was 15 I had already smoked cannabis countless times and did MDMA 5 times. When I was 13, me and my best friend stole anything we could steal from shops, including alcohol and cigarettes. At 14 I drank and smoked a lot and parents knew nothing. At 15 I got involved with the wrong people, and at a party where I didn't leave when I was supposed to I saw people who would kill and tried to be as cool as possible not to get robbed, beat up or killed. Later I found out that those people were drug dealers and members of a gang where families were involved. My parents knew nothing of my little adventures. I've had more sex in the past 10 years of my life than I probably will for the rest of it. I'm talking freaky shit. I was so open to exploring and taking advantage of being young and attractive. This led me to being single and hiding relationships from my family. They'd constantly ask why I'm still single. And you're such a catch and all that, but it was because I was too focused on getting laid as much as I could, because I knew someday that I'd want to settle down and have a family. Eventually it ruined my perception on the opposite sex and questioned whether or not a real solid relationship was possible because of the number of people out there in seemingly good relationships who were ready to cheat on their souls at the drop of a hat without question. You'd be shocked how many people married with children are willing to cheat. It's disgusting. When I was 10 or 11, my stepsister, who was 15, got tired of my bratty behavior, pinned me down and threatened me with a kitchen knife. Stabby and slicing motions, pokes near my eye, and lots of muttering about how she's tired of my shit and if I scream she'll make sure I never scream again. It wasn't until my late teens that I was comfortable handling a knife. Not until my 20s that I was comfortable with someone else handling a knife near me. My parents still don't know or understand why I hate her. When we first met I had been so excited to have an older sister, since she lived in California with her mom, and then months in I just stopped wanting to be around her. I never told them because she's gotten into fights, had abortions, and have been arrested. And they forgive her and all that shit. The experience of that day was bad enough. And my parents haven't been the best of parents. And I'm afraid that if I finally tell them they'll brush it off like they did everything else. Even though I know they're shit parents and expect that reaction, it would still hurt a lot. I've also heard them talk about my jealousy over her, which I guess is how they justified my sudden change in behavior around her. She has 3 or 4 kids now, and I leave the house when she visits. Long ago, I lived with a couple people who didn't mind me doing whatever I wanted in the house. Me and some friends took some acid one night and stayed up all night just being generally crazy. At some point my roommate at the time took a picture of me. It's a close-up of my face and it shows that I'm obviously fried. Later on, she got some photos developed. One of them was an 8x11 print of the photo of me tripping balls. She had put some Photoshop effect over it that inverted the colors and converted all the lines in the photo into wavy, laser beam looking outlines. You can see the outline of my face and my goofy grin, and that's about it. Later on, I moved back in with my mom for a short stint. When I found another place later down the road, I took most of my stuff with me. That photo got left behind. It has now been hanging on the wall at my mom's house for about 7 years. She'll never know that a picture of me, whacked out on acid, has become a permanent part of her home decor. I was once PC'd, placed in protective custody. The short version is that I went for a ride with some friends after a day of casual beer drinking. We get pulled over. Driver failed the street Olympics, wobbled on the 1-foot test. We get handcuffed, brought to the station, and told that we could either take the breathalyzer or have mandatory court. I decide to take my chances and take the test. Miraculously, I blow a 0-0 while I wasn't wasted, and the whole experience was sobering. I had consumed a beer or 2 in the last couple of hours and had no business getting that low a score, while my friends are in cells waiting to be bailed out because, unlike me, they had blown past the legal limit. The cops are buying me sodas, letting me watch TV, and asking me for my parents' phone number so they could pick me up. Knowing my parents would kill me for getting into such a predicament, I was 16 and most certainly knew better. But hey, 16-year-olds don't always make the best decisions. And knowing they had an unlisted number, I gave the police the number to my phone line. Best thing I ever saved up my money to have installed. knowing full well that there would be no answer. The police call. And of course, there's no answer. They tried again a little later. And then asked if I had a friend I could call to pick me up. I did try a couple of friends. But it being Friday night, nobody was home. And this was when people had pagers, not cell phones. I waited until my friends were bailed out and got a ride with whoever came to pick them up. TL. DR is a stupid teenager. I was almost arrested. But for whatever reason, the universe saw fit to give me a pass. Me and my mom were staying at one of her friend's house where stayed for 1 month. One time while my mom was watching TV and I was bored, I went to the family's computer room. Me being a HRNY 17-year-old, I proceeded to look up porn on their computer. Their family had been on a trip for the past weekend. I didn't know when they were coming back. As I was masturbating, I heard the kids in their car pulled up. So I immediately pulled my pants up without finishing and shut down the computer by holding the off button. I went back to my room and remembered that Firefox had the restore tabs option when the browser crashed. By this time the kids were in the computer room and by an act of the almighty their mom called them. They went out to see their grandparents. Immediately after I heard the car leave, I rushed into the computer room and saw that the PC was on. I clicked on the Firefox icon and just as I thought, it prompted me to restore tabs. I properly closed all the tabs and shut down the computer properly. It all ended well. Broke into an old abandoned paper mill. Probably 10 times by now. The last time I went there was the first time we set off an alarm. This alarm was to one specific room in a building of approximately 30 rooms and corridors. The building is not supposed to have any power going to it, let alone to a room, due to its condition. This leads me to believe that the surrounding neighborhood has set up an alarm system in this one specific room. I didn't get a good look into the room, but instead, immediately sprinted upon setting off the alarm. Within 2 minutes, there were 3 residents outside the building, eyeing it with flashlights. One resident had blocked off the 1-lane bridge, the only access to the building. How did I know this? After about 30 minutes of hiding in the brush near the train tracks close by, I attempted to have a good friend come pick me up. As I saw no real way to escape effectively, he tried to cross the bridge. The truck sped at him at about 80 miles an hour. Chased him all the way out of the neighborhood and past a gas station a good 2 miles away. They're hiding something in there. Something terrible. Relevant. We found a pile of hundreds of bottles of old cough syrup. Sealed. In another building very close by. We'll post pictures and more in-depth story if enough interest anyone asks. I went to Punta Cana, Dominican Republic with 5 guy friends and 1 other girlfriend as a sort of spring break. I'm a girl. This becomes important later. So one of our excursions of our all-inclusive trip is a night at this club called Imagine. This club is in a cave and in order to get there we had to take a cab like 45 minutes from our hotel. Okay, so we're in the middle of nowhere. In a country we do not know. In a cave and it's an open bar. This becomes a problem when young, dumb me decides to drink all the drinks. I proceed to get wasted and black out. From things my friends have told me, I basically started puking my guts out for 2 hours straight. I'm in the bathroom. The one other girl is holding up my body and helping me puke in the toilet. My guy friend is holding the other side of my body. Someone keeps yelling at him to get out of the ladies' room but he literally has to stay and hold my body up. I remember flashes of me drinking water, puking, my friend rubbing my back, me saying to take me to a hospital or back to the hotel, my friend saying we can't do that because our cab wouldn't be back until 4 AM and we had no idea where we were. So somehow I made it till 4. We get into a cab and make it back. I knock out and have the worst hangover of my entire life. My mother, as long as I live, will never hear of this. She would definitely freak the hell out. Hell, if that was my daughter I would freak the hell out. TL. Doctor went to a cave. Blacked out. The time their friend tried to seduce me when I was 16. We had family friends. A married couple who were about 8-10 years younger than my parents. The husband got hurt in an accident and I would regularly help them with their house and watch their kid. One summer I helped them out with their yard. I was up on their roof getting branches off after a storm and he came out of the house. His kids were at his parents', about an hour away, and he was going to get them and would be right back. I got off the roof and went inside to get some water. His wife walks into the kitchen wearing a low-cut tee and barely their shorts and is all over me. Took me a few minutes to figure out what was going on from Jenny is acting weird too. Holy crap, this cannot be happening. She offers me a blowjob. I decline and return to the roof, where I just try to find some shade and sit until her husband returns. Porn and erotica tries to dress that up as exciting. But I was just angry. They were friends of my parents but he was my friend too and their kids looked up to me. I never told anyone outside of Reddit. But it was the last time I saw either of them for about 8 years. They never said anything, they just stopped hanging around and calling my folks. Now that me and my siblings are in our 20s, my mom keeps bugging us to fess up on everything we kept from her as teens kids. I guess she figures that the statute of limitations has run out if she has gone this long without her finding out. My brother and sister are both pretty big partiers and potheads. But I'm pretty average. It's not like I haven't tried that stuff or anything, but I'm not as wild as they are. I'm certain that my sister has some crazy stories that she isn't telling and my brother probably has some too, but mine is that I secretly took and paid for my own piano lessons. The context is that I'm about to finish an undergrad in a music program. In first and second year I messed up registering for courses and my parents ended up having to pay for some expensive summer courses so I could graduate on time. They were pretty upset about that, but I didn't tell them that I also had to pass a piano proficiency exam. Everyone in music does, no matter what their instrument or specific degree is. I already felt bad that they had to pay a few $100s because of a dumb mistake that I had made, so I didn't have the heart to tell them they'd need to pay a few $100 more for piano lessons, so I'm paying for them out of my own pocket.